FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Glad you're back with us. We are fortunate enough right now to have Catherine Herridge joining us from the Fox News Channel. Catherine, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
What stood out to you from this Benghazi report?
There's so much new detail in this report about the night of the attack in particular and this senior-level meeting at the White House, which we had never learned of before, at about 7:30 Eastern, so 3 hours into the attack, another 5 hours left to run before the Navy SEALs were killed. And this was called a deputies meeting. That means the deputies to the cabinet secretaries, but there was one cabinet secretary there, and that was Mrs. Rescue. There were issues about sensitivities to the Libyans, whether a military rescue might be offensive to them, but then also this singular focus on the YouTube video, which was publicly blamed for the attack. But as we've shown in our reporting and now in this review by Congress, that there was no basis for that. The intelligence never spoke to a protest or a video in Benghazi.
So while this attack was still going on, I mean, with hours left in this attack,
Correct.
We find out later, they were debating how to play this to the media effectively?
I want to leave the interpretation to you, but I can
Sure.
tell you that the attack is ongoing. Sean Smith, the Foreign Service officer, is dead, but Ambassador Chris Stevens remains missing, and the two former Navy SEALs, Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty, who would later die that night defending the CIA operation, they were still alive. And during this White House meeting, it was a secure video teleconference. Mrs. Clinton was not at the White House, but was participating. 5 of the action items afterwards, so that's sort of like the directive after the meeting, related to the video, and this Pastor Terry Jones, who, in the past has burned Qurans and the like. But the point is that they're focusing on something which has nothing to do with the immediate rescue of the Americans, and none of the intelligence ever supported that there was a protest or a video connected to Benghazi. And I want to emphasize one point to your listeners. We often talk about the 4 Americans who were killed, but in fact 35 Americans were in Benghazi when you take also in total those who were operating at the CIA annex. So it was 35 lives that were at risk that night, not just the 4.
Yeah, it's a point well made, and I appreciate that. Catherine, I know we don't have you for very long because you have to go back on television. Do you have any information at all on this attack in Istanbul?
The CIA Director John Brennan said in an interview this morning with Yahoo News, and he's going to be speaking at a conference here in Washington this afternoon, that the attack in Istanbul has the signature of ISIS, and that he actually expects a similar style attack in the United States. What has the attention of my contacts is the fact that when the bombers went in, they went in guns blazing, and that suggests to them that this may have been an attempt to take hostages first and then to use the suicide vest as sort of a plan, the second part of the plan in the negotiations with police. If you're just going to detonate a suicide device and you want maximum casualties, you just walk in sort of silently and quietly to the busiest passenger line and you detonate. But this is not what happened here. So it does look like it may have been a potential hostage situation. And the power of the explosion and the number of dead and injured also suggests that it was a military-grade explosive. So this, again, goes into that sort of experienced, I wouldn't say overly sophisticated, but an experienced group of bomb makers.
Wow, and here we are heading into the July 4th weekend when
it's going to be a tough period for people. This is a really high-risk period right now, and airports really have emerged as this new soft target, and this, what I'll call sort of the soft underbelly of the security, that gap. Now we've seen it happen twice in just a period of a couple of months.
That's a good point. Catherine Herridge with the Fox News Channel, thanks for your time
Sure.
today.
FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Mr. Haney, thanks for calling us.
You're certainly welcome. Glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you on. You recently testified before, was it a House committee?
No, it was the Senate. It was the Judiciary Committee, and Ted Cruz was the chairman of the committee.
Well, that's good. And basically what you said to them is that there's been a willful blindness instituted in the Department of Homeland Security. If you could explain for my listeners what you meant by that and some of the problems you encountered in your efforts to fight terrorism and investigate it.
Well, it was a deliberate and intentional policy it began to emerge in 2008, and every year it got worse and worse to the point they were actually either modifying records in the law enforcement system or completely deleting them entirely, which cases led to San Bernardino Mosque, for example, and or the Fort Pierce Mosque, that was the mosque that Omar Mateen went to, who killed the people in Orlando. But what Loretta Lynch did when she posted that redacted transcript was exactly what has been going on behind the scenes within federal law enforcement agencies for quite some time.
That's it. I would say it's unbelievable, but clearly it's happened, so it is believable. Let's focus on San Bernardino for just a moment. It's your belief that had the leash been let up a little bit, had the reins been taken off, our investigative agencies might have prevented what happened there.
Well, my premise is very solid, based on law enforcement precedent. In the 11 months of the case that we were active on the case, called the Tablighi Jamaat case, we had 1,200 law enforcement actions. In other words, about 100 a month. I was also credited by my own agency, the National Targeting Center, for identifying 300 individuals with possible links to terrorism. Those two strong components of the case were disregarded, and the Department of Homeland Security, in conjunction with the Department of State, shut the case down somewhere around June of 2012 because of concerns for civil rights and civil liberties of individuals affiliated with the group called Tablighi Jamaat. Subsequently, I worked on another component of the case, not knowing actually that the bigger case had already been shut down, and I linked the network that the mosque in San Bernardino was part of. So my premise is that once we identify networks, organizations, and individuals, then they come on the law enforcement radar, and then we're able to take law enforcement action against them. So people transiting through the San Bernardino Mosque would have been on the radar, and we would have, for example, put Syed Farouk on the no-fly list, or Tashfeen Malik, his wife, would have been refused entry into the country, and it would have never come here in the first place. Those are two plausible ways we could have stopped it.
Wow. Philip Haney is our guest. He's the author of a new book out called See Something, Say Nothing. A Homeland Security officer exposes the government's submission to jihad. I've shaken my head as somebody on the outside looking in as to how, and I struggle for a term other than political correctness, seems to have invaded common sense law enforcement.
Well, Loretta Lynch just announced today that they're going to implement mandatory training across the federal government for what is called implicit bias. In other words, sworn officers and or other personnel within the federal government are assumed to have implicit bias in the way that they conduct their affairs and do cases. And so now, personnel who are still active duty within the federal government are going to receive this mandatory training. It's almost like Orwell, thought crime.
Well, it's almost like they want to deprogram and reprogram these investigators because you're not supposed to suspect that a mosque where we know there have been problems might be connected to other mosques where there have been problems.
Well, back in 2012, the FBI put out what is called Touchstone Document, Training Guidelines. You can still look it up on the web. Touchstone Document, Training Guidelines 2012. It's a 3-page document. In the first paragraph of the 3 main paragraphs in the document, I'll paraphrase it a little. It says, even though an individual is affiliated with a known terrorist group, you cannot automatically assume that that individual is a terrorist himself. So right there, the policy is separating the organization from the individual. It's just like saying that planets rotate around the sun. just by themselves, that there's no gravitational influence from the sun. So we're going to disregard the sun in terms of the behavior of the planets. That because in the Islamic world, everything is about family and then community and then the international, what's called the Ummah. One of those words we're not supposed to use now, according to DHS, means global community. To separate those two is completely contrary to the nature of the Islamic world, and it makes it virtually impossible for law enforcement to ever develop cases to the probable cause level.
Well, thank you for having the guts to stand up. You're a civilian now, correct?
Yes, I retired honorably in July 31st of 2015. I use the word honorably because the outcome of the 9 times that I was investigated was never a certainty that I'd survive the process. But thankfully, I did survive the process, and I retired with my badge and credentials July 31st, 2015. And now I'm a civilian, yes, but my vow is still active duty. So now I go where my vow leads me. Yesterday, it led me to testify before the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's actually led me to be talking to you now, and I will continue going where my vow leads me in the days ahead.
Well, thank you for that. And Mr. Haney, how frightened should we be of what this has done to the law enforcement process in this country? You're a civilian now. I've always been a civilian. I've never been in law enforcement. I trust that the FBI and the people investigating terrorism are going to protect me, but it sounds to me like we've opened up some pretty serious flaws in that process.
Well, if you look at if you analyze the cases that we've seen in the last few months and years, Fort Hood, Chattanooga, San Bernardino, Orlando, Boston bombing, there was a remarkable amount of overlap, or I could say a remarkable similarity in the gaps vis-a-vis law enforcement that are in common with all of those cases. And until we have the courage and the wherewithal to stand up and address this honestly, we're going to keep seeing the same thing happen over and over. But I'm not pessimistic. I'm actually quite optimistic, because I can guarantee you that my colleagues that are still active duty in law enforcement and in the military are really ready, willing, and able to do their job and to fulfill their vow. Just let us take the handcuffs off of us, and we can do our job. It's not about violating people's civil rights. It's about enforcing immigration law and standing up for the principles of the U.S. Constitution.
Well said, sir. Philip Haney is the author of See Something, Say Nothing. You can find it for sale there on Amazon and all the other major booksellers, and I would encourage people to go out and check that out. Mr. Haney, thanks for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. I really do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for standing up and fighting for us. We appreciate that. Good to hear from you. Man, that is just frightening.
FM News Talk 97.1.
On demand audio.
Justin Hulsey, who's doing just that, he's founded a company called Mobile Safe Storage. Justin, how are you?
Hey, Mark. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you for giving us some time today.
No problem. I appreciate it.
I love this idea. So in a nutshell, you're going to have a van, I'm assuming, or a truck of some sort that parks outside of Busch Stadium where people would be able to check valuables, including handguns.
Correct. It won't be parked right outside of Busch Stadium. We actually found a private lot owner that's willing to work with us at Patio. So Chris Dorr is going to allow us to pull on the lot and be stationed on the lot, which is, I mean, we've been fighting it for months. So to get close enough to Patios so people can use the service is a monumental step.
Well, sure. Plus, you're just on the other side of the highway there. I mean, the stadium is not more than 100 yards from there, right?
Correct, sir.
Yeah, right. I wondered where you might be parked. I mean, this is a great idea. I know that it took you a while to get through the process of figuring out whether you could do it, whether you could, whether it was legal,
Correct.
whether the city would allow it. Maybe you could describe some of that for the listeners.
Correct. Yeah. The first part is when we found out that when we saw that Chris Santa was shot, we decided, what can we do about it? I felt to myself, what can I do on the civilian side to figure out a way around it. It's a way to where this can't happen again, where people are able to protect themselves and reduce the public safety issue of guns being stolen out of cars, because we're in July. Soon we'll be in July, and that's where the peak of firearms are stolen out of vehicles. I mean, people are going to continue to carry, so how do we get to the point where we're at right now? As far as dealing with state, I tried to talk to the local FBI that pointed me in the direction of the ATF. Local ATF field office transferred me to Washington, D.C., which they were intrigued by the idea, because it's never, as far as everybody knows, it's not been done anywhere in the country. So that's when we got directed to the state, because all CCW-related questions are left up to the state. So I got in touch with Ian Dunlap, which goes through the public safety statutes, city public ordinances, looks through the laws to see if it's even possible, if this idea was even doable. So once we got a green light from him, then we started to push through the city to figure out what kind of hoops the city would kind of throw us to try to make this happen.
Right. Did you get pushback from the city of St. Louis? I mean, were the chief and mayor on board with this?
I personally haven't spoke to him about the idea.
Okay.
But, I mean, it's a touchy subject. Anytime you put guns in the media, it becomes a very touchy subject. I'm just trying to make sure that a person that abides by the law, a CCW, a licensed civilian that, follows the law, and is able to obtain a CCW, can have afforded the opportunity to protect his life from the minute he leaves point Z, the parking lot, to point A, being Busch Stadium.
Right.
And instead of leaving it that whole, because they know they're vulnerable. Criminals, I mean, they know they're vulnerable. So.
Well, they won't be as vulnerable after this. That's for sure. So let's
Absolutely.
talk. Let's talk about some of the specifics of what you're able to do. I mean, kind of describe for me. Do you have the vehicle? I'm assuming already and ready to go. What is it?
Correct.
Is it an armored truck or what?
Yeah, it's a P30 step van with added weight and suspension, so we could add the steel on the inside to be able to stop to the rounds.
Okay.
So we got cameras on the outside. We got the vehicle wrapped. Right now, we're just ironing out a little bit of details to get the truck ready to go, because we have literally 16 days before we're on location. So
okay.
we got a lot we're doing.
So people come up to the truck. You or one of your employees is standing there. They say, "I want to check
Correct.
my weapon." Is it locked in a cage? I mean, how are you doing this?
Correct. The website's being redeveloped right now. We're
Okay.
going to shoot a video that kind of explains the procedure, so people can watch it while they're in line. And we'll have a monitor up as well. So as they're waiting in line, they're signing a waiver and going through the claim ticket, because they got to fill out a claim ticket with a name and a phone number, and then they will get, people. You got to look at every value, everything that's going to happen. So people are going to lose claim tickets. So we got to be able to text you a claim ticket. So when you come back, you have to have an ID to be able to claim your property once it's checked in. So on one side of the van is going to be strictly firearms. On the other side is going to be other personal merchandise, garments. I had one lady that wanted to check a stroller. She called and said, "Hey, can I check a stroller in with your truck?" At this point, we're going to take everything, anything we can. So, but I mean, there is no effort without error and shortcoming, Theodore Roosevelt said. So we're going to keep, maneuvering, kind of figuring out tweaks and stuff to make it as safe for people to use as possible, and still have 100% accountability, and that's what all this is about.
Well, I don't know how big the truck is, but I think you're going to need a bigger truck.
I hope so. That's a good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. We're talking to Justin Hulsey, who is with the Mobile Safe Storage. Justin, I'm sure this is a question that you've gotten already. You're going to charge $10?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. $10 cash. It's $10 cash if you're running it by credit card. I have to pay a service fee through the credit card industry, so it's $15 to use a credit card. If you show up using cash, it's $10.
Great idea. So from a liability perspective, and I'm sure this is something you've had to work out as well, what liability would you have if somebody checked their gun before the ball game, went into the ball game and got hammered, and came back out and wanted their gun back? Do you have any liability to give them their property back?
And then on that, first off, it's bound to happen, okay? But on such a small percentage, most CCW weapon holders are professionals. You know
right.
what I mean?
They're going to abide by the law.
If they go out and get hammered, it leaves them open and that's what they're against. They just want to go have a good time with their family or go out and feel like they're protected. In the instance they come back, our professionals, I have a Chase security company as well. These guys will evaluate. If you're impaired to a point, there's a difference between having a couple beers and being responsible and being hammered when you come back up to the truck.
Correct.
In case you come back and you're impaired and we can visually see, my professionals have 144 hours of training. The minute that they see that you're impaired to the point that you're not responsible enough for the claimed item of such as a firearm, it's going to go into a hold process. Now, we have a building downtown. Let it wear off. You can come back. You can pick it up at the building at your convenience, probably the next day.
So how do you handle security? I mean, how?
Correct. We can touch base on that.
Sure.
We had to, to guard this type of truck and to see what we're trying to do. There's not really security companies and insurance and everything. The liability, like you said, is just, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. So we started our own. I took a partner in on Chase Security to actually help bring people on, and we went through professionals. I mean, we interviewed over 80 people, and we've got a dozen people hired. So a little bit more, a little bit less. We don't really want to disclose the number of actually how many employees or how many people will be on site because of operational security, but
Sure.
You will be able to see that there's a force both in uniform and uniform exempt. So we started the security company so we could actually protect the people. And I mean, and these guys, like I said, 144, it's not a typical 20-year-old guy that passes a background check that's 16 or 32 hours, which is the state mandates you've got to have for security training. Now, these guys are, they got to pass the physical fitness standard. They got to pass the mental evaluation standard. A lot that goes into it. Like I said, to be able to hire a dozen or so people out of 80 interviews of people in the industry, we have a strict culture of just professionals.
Well, I think it's a great idea. If I've got one caller, I'm not going to put him on with you, but he's calling to find out if there's any stock available in your company.
Yeah, I bootstrapped it. It's all myself. I tried that for months, trying to figure out lawyers and percentages and dealing with equity of the company and everything else. As soon as I can get a working model and then to see if this concept will even bite, I mean, I think it will. I put everything I have into it. So that'll be open to debate once we get moving and people want to come in and actually get these trucks all over. Because, I mean, it's a needed service. If we're not trying to make a ton of money. That's not the goal. The goal is if we can stop one person from breaking in and stealing a firearm and putting it on the street, the company succeeded. We succeeded. We won. That's the goal. And allow people the convenience to feel like they're safe and draw more people in.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, because if people can get away with charging $20 and $25 to park down there, they're getting a bargain if they can check their firearm for $10. I think
absolutely, and that's what I would pay. I mean, that's what I'd pay more. But honestly, it's like I want to drive people to it and actually use the service and see that this can work. That this business model can work, and it can work not only in St. Louis but all over the place. So
you said you're 16 days out. Is that what you told me? What's your startup date? When can people expect to see the truck down there?
Yes, sir. July 15th, we're going to be at Patios. Now,
okay.
That's our soft launch. We want to get out there. We will take some people. I'm not expecting to sell out the truck. So I just want to get people down there, get used to seeing it, get used to the process, go through the monitors, get them through lines, answer questions, because there's going to be a ton of them.
Sure.
And then just kind of run through the process, get them onto the website, because we ideally want to get people to pre-register. That way we got people that are coming down, hit the website, say, hey, I'm coming down to the game. They want to buy a 5-day block. They're going to go to 5 Cardinals game this year and buy it at a little cheaper rate. And that way I can kind of anticipate, the kind of flow of traffic, because that's another thing too, is time. We're going to try to get each person in and out in 10 seconds. So if you can step up to the vehicle, go through the safety procedures of the safety barrel, stepping into the box where it's just you and one security guard, so you're not flagging, exposing, and then you're pointed in a safe direction. Then we can get people in, people out, sign the waiver, take payment, get them out in 10 seconds. That's what we're aiming for.
It's a great concept. Can't wait to see it in action. Justin Hulsey, good luck with it. Mobile Safe Storage is the name of the truck, so you can start looking for it in the Patios parking lot on about July 15th.
Mark, thank you so much.
We'll check in with you again once things get rolling and see how it's going.
Please do. Please.
All right, Justin, thank you.